Hello, Vivek sir.
Yeah,
Can we start the session, sir?
yeah, we'll start.
Yeah.
No problem.
On behalf of Department of Information Technology, Thaduman Shahani Engineering College, I welcome Mr. Vivek Gawane, CDAC Pune. Vivek Gawane is a Joint Director in HPC, Medical and Bioinformatics Application Group, CDAC Pune. He received his BE degree in Computer Science and Engineering from Pune University and MTech degree in IT, Artificial Intelligence from RGPV, Bhopal. He has more than 14 years of experience in the field of parallel and distributed computing. His expertise include design and development of parallel application using MPI and OpenMP. He has been involved in administration and management of supercomputing clusters at bioinformatics resources and applications facility and in development of various HPC applications at CDAC Pune. His other field of interest includes artificial neural networks and deep learning. This is just a short introduction of Vivek sir. Now I request sir to start with his session. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. And I also thank the organizers for inviting me for this to deliver this lecture. So to start with, as you know, the topic of today's presentation is the evolution of computational architecture. So the overall conference or development program being of quantum computing, seems to be a little different, but we can just trace back how this computational architecture starts and how this quantum computing is being arrived. So in overview of my presentation, first we'll see the generations of computers, how the computer first came into existence and how it started, to the basics of our current computational architecture, that is von Neumann architecture. Again, we'll see few modern processors architecture, how this architecture evolved basically. We'll see various classifications of these computers, various ways the computers are being classified. Uh, Again, and we'll see how this has led to the today's quantum computing world. What has been the trigger point for this quantum computing? Okay, to start with, the the computing basically started long back in last century, that is 1837, when the first general purpose computing model was proposed by Charles Babbage. So it was called the analytical engine. So it generally actually it never came into existence, but the model was so promising and it had all the type of modern components which the modern computer has. So it had an arithmetic logic unit. It had a control flow in form of various loops and branches. Again, it had an integrated memory of itself. Uh, and that's all. But the overall design was a mechanical computer. So this is where the computing started long back in 1837, and hence Charles Babbage is called as the father of computers. So it was his idea how this overall things computation should be taken up by machines. This was followed up by various generations of computer which came into existence. Uh, so from starting from Charles Babbage, where it was a mechanical computers, to the various mainframes, to the existing computers. There are various generations of computers which took place. The first computer or the commercial computer, first successful computer came up in 1945, in the period of 1945 to 55, which we call the first generation of computers. So it was the advent of these vacuum tubes, which were used as basic components. That was a vacuum tube transistor kind of components which came into existence, and the entire computers were based on these vacuum tubes. So all the basic arithmetics and all operations were computed using these vacuum tubes, but these were very slow devices. And also the size of the devices were big, so the overall compute infrastructure was quite big and bulky, and it again was very costly affair at that time also. Again, there were memories inbuilt which were based on the mercury delay lines. Again, mercury delay lines is where there is a mercury tube or mercury wherein the current is given on the both side of the tube, and that mercury tube holds on the memory. So the memory was the delay lines of mercury. So it was based on that, and the entire computer was uh, basically operated using assembly languages or the machine languages only. So there were no high level languages at that time. Again, it was based on only fixed point arithmetic, say 4-bit or 8-bit arithmetic. It was not a like integer has a 8-bit. It has a fixed point, 5-bit, 6-bit. A fixed point arithmetic was used at that time for the computation. Again, the punch cards, paper tapes, and all these things were invented and that were used to feed data and program to these machines. And magnetic takes and magnetic drums were used as a secondary memory. And entire all these computer basically are used for the scientific purpose only, to do scientific computation. And the main aim, all this where computation start is basically the military aim, where to check the ballistics, how to fire a ballistic. So that was the basic evolution or the starting point, because that was where the funding was available. Everything started with that time. So there are various computers which were built in the first generations. Uh, few such examples is ENIAC. So ENIAC is nothing but a electronic numerical integrated calculator. It was the first programmable electronic general purpose digital computer which was made. And as I said, it was used basically for testing ballistics by US Army or Department of Defense from US. And then it followed various versions of computers after ENIAC, which EDSAC, EDVAC, and UNIVAC. So UNIVAC was quite successful at the end of the first generations of computers. So this actually occupied the entire room or entire building for the computation. It had at that time the speed was very high as per that time frame. But today's mobiles are quite faster than, quite means huge, huge number of times faster than those machines. Even our wristwatch, digital watch is also faster than those machines at that time. So this is how it was, but it was a great achievement at that point of time because there was no compute infrastructure. All the infrastructure was based on mechanical instruments. Then came the era of second generation of computers. The second generation basically started from 1955 to 10 years of 55 to 65 with the advent of transistors, which replaced the vacuum tubes. So transistor was nothing but an electronic device uh, which could uh, which could be used or which could replace the vacuum tubes. And because it was a miniature, it was an integrated circuit kind of thing. Uh, so it actually reduced the size of the computer from the entire rooms to at least 50%. So one example you can see here. So it has increased the speed on 1,000 folds over the previous counterpart or previous generation of processors. And again, it consumed very less power because vacuum tube required a lot of powers and had very low performance. Over that, these transistors were quite fast and also consumed less power. Again, memories were invented. So there were magnetic core memories that were used as the main memory and which had a random access pattern. Uh, in the initial generation, it was just a mercury line. So there was a random access memory was not available. So the magnetic ferrite core memories were invented and these were used in the second generation of these computers. Again, magnetic tape and magnetic disk were used as a secondary storage, and hardware for floating point arithmetic was also developed. So in initial generation, it was basically an integer arithmetic. So floating point or decimal arithmetic was invented and was implemented in the second generation of computers. It was also preceded or it was also followed up or counterparted by the high level languages such as Fortran and COBOL. So these what we today know these computers is as a mainframe computers. So second generation computers were the mainframe computers which were programmed in Fortran or COBOL, and it had a separate input-output processors which were
Have you
developed
completed till
that could
here?
operate in parallel along with CPU to manage the input and output operations and keep the CPU for computing. So this was this
You
mainframe
should have
computer.
told me now once you complete.
The example of these
Just
are the
yes, sure.
Vijay sir, you are on mute. Nagvini ma'am,
What problem
please
are
mute
you
you.
getting?
Ma'am, you mute yourself, Nagvini ma'am. Vivek sir, you are on mute. Vivek sir. Yeah, thank you.
so I don't know from where I got muted. So could you listen to this generations of computers? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, that we had listened. Second generation of computers. This slide was also audible.
Okay. So these were basically the mainframe computers, which was the second generation of computers, which were recently being used, and it was used by Department of Defense and various other industries, big industries. CTC 1604 was the main computer which was commercially used for business as well, apart from the military use. So another generation which preceded the generation was from 1965 to 1974. So this is the third generation of computers. Basically, these were the small integrated circuits which were used in this computer. So ICs were invented after 1965, and these were used uh, as a main backbone of computing. So all transistors and everything went inside the integrated circuits. So this is a small scale integration, we call it as integrated circuits, and all the CPU and IO processor etc. were made from these integrated circuits. Again, these computers also saw uh, the use of keyboards and mouse for input as an input devices. Okay. In the beginning, the magnetic core memories were used, but then semiconductor memories, RAMs, were replaced these magnetic devices as main memory. Again, operating system was the main introduction, which was not there in previous generation of computers, which were then in the third generation of computers. So these were pretty small computers which could fit in small area on a desk as well. Again, cache and virtual memories were introduced. So entire memory hierarchy came into existence from the third generation. It was also there in the second generation, but not as evident as in third generation, wherein there are various memory hierarchies. The cache memory was the fast memory, which was near to the CPU cores, followed by the RAM and followed by the storage or the secondary memory. So the memory hierarchy was invented to fasten up the speed. So if you can see over these three generations, the main motive or the objective was to improve the performance of computing, and hence various architectural changes right from the technology took place, from vacuum tube to transistors to integrated circuits. So these generations kept on improving. So after this integrated circuit came into existence, the computers were pretty fast to uh, so that the multi-user environment can be put up. So this computer also had a multi-user applications and online system as well as database management systems. So all these things came into a third generation of computers. So these you might have seen in the very old colleges like IITs or universities, the old machines which were PDP or CDC machines. So these were quite used till very recently. So it is CDC 6600, IBM 370, the PDP machine, and the Honeywell 6000 are few such examples of the third generation of machines. These were again used for the scientific purpose for research and as well as by Department of Defense in United States. Till this time it was not very well prominent in India, but these machines were quite well used in United States and Europe. The fourth generation of computers started from 1975 to 1990, 89-90. So this is where the personal computer PC came into existence. The microprocessors were inverted and introduced as CPU. So integrated circuits were replaced by the microprocessors. So initially the entire logic, ALU, control unit and everything was on the main board using the integrated circuit. Now everything has been integrated into a VLSI design inside a microprocessor chip. So this large scale integration could enable these microprocessors, and that's from point where the computer shrinked into its size as well as improved the performance. And the first PC came into existence, that is a personal computer, which was basically via IBM PC we call it. And tens and thousands of transistors was placed in a single chip to reduce the footprint, and the technology has improved. Again, the CRT screen and laser printers, etc., scanners were developed. So, what we see the computers today actually visually started to take shape in the fourth generation. Again, lot of computer hardware, what we call as a processor architecture, started developing from this point onwards. So there are various techniques and technologies which were used to speed up the processing of a computer, to speed up the processing power, not just hardware wise, but the organization within the hardware as well. So that's where everything is. So for example, parallelism, pipelining, virtual memory, everything started from this generation onwards. The introduction of mid-level languages like C and OS like Unix was invented. Again, this was the generation where GUI was provided onto the computers. Before that, it is basically a textual interface or other kind of interfaces. Again, these computers were just like every generation, these were better in terms of power consumption as well as cost. And again, speed was quite better than what was there in the previous generation. That's where in this generation itself the computer revolution in India started. So in fourth generation, just for example, Intel and Motorola had a main say in the processor market with Intel's invent of 8088 processor, which was followed by 80386 and 486, and Motorola with 68000 processor and 6804 processors. So the assemblers like IBM, Apple, they used the Motorola processor and Intel processor to make their PCs. Again, the computation revolution which came in India during this period saw the existence of ARM 10,000, which was built by CDAC. So this was a generation of Cray and supercomputing which got up the speed. Anyways, there basically came. It was not a supercomputer as such. It was a serial processing kind of computer, which where they wanted to increase the performance and speed. But actual multi-processing and multi-programming started from the fourth generation with the invent of Cray machines and PCB revolution. The fifth generation is the current generation, wherein we see the laptop. It is based on ultra large scale integration technology. We have seen the development of artificial intelligence. Just because now artificial intelligence power, it was not possible before this generation to have such a big compute power. With this availability of compute power with fifth generation hardware, the artificial intelligence took a mainstream, and that there was a development of natural language processing, various parallel processing, superconducting technologies. Everything advanced very fastly, and now you can see the deep learning and artificial has taken over the entire world, and it was just because of the power and processing speed of the current generation of processors. So the entire processor, entire machine, which was almost a building long, just concentrated into our hands, like mobiles, tablets, Androids, and laptops. So it also saw the humanoids and other robotics. Basically, it is all that has happened is the artificial intelligence and deep learning has taken a mainstay in all kind of application, right from medical to genomics to earth simulations to all other kind of applications are taken up, right from automations to everything. So this is the current generation which we are looking in, and various supercomputing clusters based on this are also coming up in the entire country. And after these generations of computers, I'll just had a slide on the supercomputing era, which started with the third generation. The man behind it was Seymour Cray, who is also called the father of supercomputing. So it started with this third generation, that is UNIVAC 1103, or you can call it a second generation. At the end of second generation it started, CDC 1604. So these were serial improved machines. It was a serial machines, but a very improved and faster performance. And in the third generation, the Cray one came, which was a parallel machine. In today's, if you see supercomputing era, we see Raiken Fugaku, which is a very big computer based on Fujitsu technology. Again, there is an Intel-based Aurora machine in US, which is on in Aragon National Laboratories, and Cray machine. So there are various partners which are there, which are working into a supercomputing area. Supercomputer is nothing but a multi-core, multi-processing platform with various servers connected together to form a single uniform environment. So that power of multiple servers can be clubbed together and put to practice for a single application or dedicated for a single application. So this is the current generation supercomputing era. So this entire computation or computer architectures or whatever the computers were generated over the years are basically classified classified in various ways. There is a Flynn's classification which was proposed by Flynn in 1966. It is based on multiplicity of instruction streams and data streams in a computer. So there are multiple instruction data streams. So how many there are parallel instruction, how much parallel data can be computed. So based on that, this classification is there. Again, Fein's classification is based on serial versus parallel processing. And there is a Handler's classification, which is determined the degree of parallelism and pipelining in various subsystem level of the computation. So we'll see this one by one. So the Flynn's classification is based on the data stream and an instruction stream. So if there is a single instruction processing a single data, it is called as SISD, single instruction, single data. It is a uniprocessors kind of machine or a serial processing machine. If there is a single instruction but there is a multiple data which it can process, so these kind of machines are called SIMD machines. So pipeline and vector processors are example of single instruction multiple data machines. If there are multiple instructions which works on a single data set, so it is called as MISD kind of a machine. So systolic arrays are such one such example, wherein the data is same and you have to operate on multiple such data. You have to do multiple operations on the same data. So for those kind of things, this MISD kind of computers are there. And the MIMD can be called as truly parallel computers, wherein multiple instructions can be utilized to process multiple data. So it is multiprocessor or multi-core or multi-computers can be classified under the MIMD hardware architectures. If you see what SISD is there, so there is a data pool and an instruction pool. So the single instruction from one instruction pool is processed by this processing unit, and it works on a single data point from this data pool. So this is one by one it process all the instructions and with the respective data set which is given. So this is a SISD computer. Another SIMD is, so there is a data pool and instruction pool, but there are multiple processing units. So these processing units takes the data, parallel data, I mean different type of data from this data pool, and the same instruction is issued to all these processing units at a time. So different type of data is processed by the same instruction. So just to give you an example, you look at this loop. So it is an integer array, A is 4, B and C, and this for loop which runs till 4, 1 to 4, 5, and it basically stores B plus C. So this is the instruction here. If the B is 1 and C is 9, so A0 will store. So all these instructions will be processed parallelly by each by one processing unit. So this is how this can. For serial instruction, this would have taken 4 different iterations. Herein this can be achieved within a single pass, a single go. This is achieved. So this has improved the performance of the computer using SIMD or vector units. The next category is the MISD, that is multiple instruction and single data. So there is a data pool where and there is an instruction pool. Now there might be scenarios wherein you want to have different kind of operations on the same data set. So these kind of computers are meant for that and work like that. So data from a single data pool is fetched by both the processing units, and there are different instructions are fetched from an instruction pool, and this processing unit operates on the same data for a different instruction set to produce the different results parallelly at the same time. And the combination of all is this multi instruction and multiple data, wherein there is a parallel data connection as well as parallel instruction pools connections. So the processing unit can fetch the data and instruction parallelly. A different data and a different instruction is processed by each processing unit, and all the processing units works parallelly to process the entire data. And this is the true parallel processing, but there are very few examples where this MIMD kind of architectures are very useful. In the current scenario, they are made to use, but initially there were no such scenarios wherein this multiple instruction, multiple data computers were successfully used. Now coming to the FENGS classification. Okay, if you all have any question, you can just interrupt me and ask it at that point itself. I'll continue with this FENGS classification. So FENGS suggested to classify these computers, whatever were available, with the use of degree of parallelism. So how much parallel this, what kind of parallelism is embedded in this machine, whether it's a bit parallel or word parallel. Now what is meant by bit and word parallel? So there words are made from bits, so multiple bits get together to form a word, and there are multiple words. So if a computer processes, how the computer processes these bits and words, that's where this FENGS classification is concentrated towards. If it is a word serial and bit serial kind of process, that means this kind of computers is basically a uniprocessor in terms of FENGS classification, where each bit is processed sequentially from each word. So after first word is over, each word is processed bit by bit, followed by the next word. The second type of computers according to these classifications are word parallel and bit serial. So this is also called as a slice processing. By this, if you have 10 words of say 5 bits each, so these kind of computers will process these 10 words in 5 sets. So in first set, they will take first bit from each word and process them parallelly. So if there are 5 bits in each word, so in 5 sets this processing will take place. So they process all the words parallelly, so it is slice processing. The next is the word serial and bit parallel, wherein it is also called as a word slice processing, where one word comprising of n bits are processed. So word by word it is processed, not bit by bit. First word will be processed, followed by second word, and followed by third word. And the last one is a word parallel and bit parallel processing, where there is it is actually the fully parallel processing, where all the words are processed parallelly. So this is the FENGS classification. So all the computers based on this classification were, it's like that. The PDP-11 processes 16 words and a single bit. So similarly, IBM 370 supercomputer, it processes 32 bit word and 1 bit length. And MPP, that is parallel processing processor, just opposite of that. And ELAC 4 was placed in this graph at the right top corner, wherein it could process both bit and word parallel. So it is ELAC 4 is an example of word parallel bit parallel processing. So now coming to the third type of classification of this supercomputing.
ಸಿಕ್ಕತ್ರಿ ಮಾಡ್ ಅದ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಇಡ್ರಿ ಈ ಟೇಬಲ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಡ್ರಿ ಕಳಿಬೇಡ್ರಿ.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the third kind of classification is the handlers classification, where he proposed that computers can be parallelized at various subsystem levels. So one is processor control unit, bit level circuit, and arithmetic logic unit. So how much parallelization is there at the various level of subsystems? So it was basically characterized by by the triplets containing 6 independent entities. So handlers classification classified it like TC is equal to K into K dash, D into D dash, and W into W dash. So K is nothing but a number of processors within a computer. So how many processors are there inside a computer? Yeah, so it is basically the processor control unit. So how many processor control units are there? And how many of such processor control units which are already there can be pipelined together? So it is based on number of units and pipeline. How many can be pipelined? At the lower level, that is next subsystem level, how many ALUs are there under the control of one process control unit? And how many such ALUs can be pipelined? So each process control unit can have multiple ALUs, and if pipelining is implemented, how many these ALUs can be pipelined together or are pipelined together? And again, what is the word length for each ALU? W dash. That is a bit level circuit. And how many such words can be pipelined together, or how many pipeline stages are there in an ALU? That means how many words can be pipelined together. The number of stages of pipelining, the number of ALUs that can be pipelined, and number of processors or processor control units which are present, and those can be pipelined. Based on this, handlers classification classified the entire set of computers. So this ends with the classification of computers. So we'll go ahead. Any questions till this point? Okay. So we'll go ahead with the basics of modern computer. So modern computer basically started with the architecture proposed by von Neumann. It is started with IS computers. The von Neumann proposed a architecture where there is a central processing unit, a memory integrated to it, and input and output devices. So the entire set of till today's generation, all the computers are predecessor to von Neumann. But there were some issues with von Neumann architecture as well. So what is a von Neumann architecture? So in von Neumann architecture, a processor unit that contains arithmetic logic unit and a processor register. Okay, so this is a processing unit where it contains the ALU and a register. And there is a control unit which controls the entire flow of the program and how these registers and ALU are being served with data and instructions. So this control is taken up by the control unit. Again, there is a memory, primary and a secondary storage memory, which are connected to the via a bus. And this bus also connects the display and the input out, that is input and output devices. So there is a single bus which connects these input output devices with the CPU. The CPU contains the registers and the control unit and the ALU. And the main memory is also present, and secondary storage is also present, which is connected via this single bus. So basically, von Neumann architecture is a stored program and shared memory kind of architecture, So it can because previous generation didn't had this main storage kind of devices wherein the program was stored. In von Neumann, program can be stored and fetched into memory and executed. But the issue with this computer or this architecture was there was a single bus both for data as well as instructions. So data stream and instruction stream and everything was processed by a single bus, and this bus became the bottleneck for this computer. And this is also referred to as a von Neumann bottleneck. So this was overcome by the next generation of computers architecture, which is called as the Harvard architecture. So during the evolution, when the von Neumann came, all the bottlenecks were removed using Harvard architecture, where he proposed to use different set of bus for instruction and data. So here you can see the first figure shows the CPU and data and instruction memory. So entire data and instruction was fetched from the single memory on a single bus, wherein which the improvisation of that was a Harvard architecture, which initially used a different data memory, a different instruction memory, and different buses to connect this data and instruction memory to CPU. And this was again improvised, so that now this distributed memory for instruction and data was clubbed together to form a shared memory. So now it was a shared memory with a different segments inside it. And one was a data segment or a data area, and another was a instruction segment or instruction area. And this instruction area and data area was connected to the CPU by two different buses, that is the address bus and the data bus, or the instruction bus and data bus. So these were the various evolutions or the improvisations over the previous generations of architectures in a quest to improve the performance of a computer. When the microprocessor come, the initial processor which was quite successful was the Intel's 8086 processor. So this entire microprocessor was based on von Neumann, or you can call as the Harvard architecture. So it had an arithmetic logic unit, a control unit, bus interface unit, and a register sets. Then it has various pointers, 2 points, various segments in the memory. So the function of control unit was basically to control the flow of a program. The ALU used to do all the arithmetic and logic operations like addition, multiplication, differentiation, everything. But what the data which ALU should get and from where the data should get was controlled by the control unit. So control unit, the function is to control the location of the data, from where the data comes, to fetch the data and put into the respective registers, to set the flags. So various flags, that is index flags, index register, SI, source index, source pointer, CSDS, these all pointers and flag setting was done by the control unit. Again, the advancement of instruction pointer and decoding of instruction, this everything is done by the control unit, and the data is given to the ALU for processing. This control unit controls the bus interface units to basically instruct them to fetch the required address from address and data buses. So this was the overall architecture of an 8086 microprocessor by Intel. Now this was a sequential, but this was not a sequential, but this architecture also involved a lot of improvements which came after the third generation or during the third generation. One such improvement in the processing over the generations which came up is the evolution of instruction pipelining. So because initially all the instructions were sequentially fetched, executed, when the execution is complete, the next instruction was fetched. How to improve the performance of this? So the concept of pipelining came into existence. So now the control unit was divided into multiple stages. So this is called as the pipeline stages. So first stage we can call as the instruction phase stage. Second stage is the instruction decode stage. Third is the instruction execution stage, and the fourth is the write back stage. So there can be 4 or 5 stages pipeline, wherein you can insert few more stages inside based on the logic. So the overall idea of this pipelining was, how can you overlap the execution of instructions of one instruction over the another instruction, so that the time is saved. So what could have been done is, there was the instruction had its own stages. For example, when instruction is fetched into memory, it is just the copying of the what is the instruction to the memory. Then we need to understand what the instruction is, whether it's a multiply instruction or add instruction. That's where instruction needs to be decoded, and that part was made separate as a stage 2, the instruction decoding. Now when you know what is the instruction and it has been decoded, now it has to be executed. So ALU has to be told that okay, this is how it has to be executed, and that execution is done by ALU. So this instruction execution is one more stage. And again, after when the instruction is executed, the result is come out. That result has to be saved or stored somewhere, where the write back stage comes in. Between stage 2 and stage 3, there can be one more stage, which can be, most of the pipelines have incorporated. It is called as operand fetch. Now, when instruction is decoded, being decoded or is decoded, the operand has to be also fetched into memory, so that, or you can call a data fetch, so that they can be acted upon. So how this pipeline helped in the parallelization or reducing the execution time, we can see in this diagram. So now see, these are the various stages of pipeline: S1, S2, S3 and S4. And these are the clock cycle, I1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now each instructions take multiple clock cycle for execution. Now see, now if there are multiple instructions, and if the instruction I1 is in the first clock cycle, the processor can fetch one instruction. So it has fetched the instruction I1, which is in an instruction fetch stage. In the next clock cycle, now it has already fetched, so it will go into the instruction decode stage. So this instruction I1 is getting decoded, but meanwhile the stage 1 would have been empty. So the instruction 2 is fetched. So in fetch stage, instruction 2 comes into a fetch stage. In the third clock cycle, the instruction 1 is in execution stage, whereas an instruction 2 is in decode stage, and instruction 3 is in execute. Sorry, the other way around. Instruction 1 is in fetch. Instruction 3 is in fetch stage. Instruction 2 is in decode stage, and instruction 1 is in execute stage, and so on. So what we have achieved is, over the 6 cycles, clock cycles, we have executed 3 instructions. Okay. If one instruction takes 4 clock cycles, if it would have not been a pipeline, it would have taken 4 into 3, that is 12 clock cycles to execute all the 3 instructions. But we have reduced the time by 2. So this is what the pipeline we have achieved by using staged pipelines for instruction execution. So pipelines are nothing but, as we see, it is a part of control unit which are divided into stages: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and each instruction goes into one stage at a time, followed by the next stage, and so on, so that other instructions can follow and get into the stage and into the execution simultaneously. So this is not truly parallel instruction execution, but it is an overlapped operation to reduce the execution time. So this was one of the architectural change which came during the evolution of the computer architectures. Then came the era of superscalar architecture. So what is the superscalar architecture? As we have seen, there is an instruction pipelining. So at the instruction execution stage, there can be multiple execution units. So here we can see one instruction is executed at a time in an execution stage, that is S4. So it can execute one instruction at a time. But with superscalar architecture, there can be multiple execution units which work parallelly. So this is the instruction pipeline, where instruction fetch, decode, operand fetch, operand decode. This is the instruction execution and instruction decode. Sorry, here it should have been the write back stage. So in this execution unit, there can be a floating point execution unit. There can be multiple integer units. Okay, so for example, there is a multiple adders, and there are 2 add instructions. So 2 add instruction can be done parallelly by the execution unit, or even a floating point instruction execution and an integer instruction execution can be done parallelly in the execution unit, because there are multiple different execution units. So existence of multiple execution unit, for example, multiple adders, multiple multiplier units, as well as multiple floating point units, comprises of a superscalar architecture. So this kind of architecture is called as superscalar architecture. So this array processors basically was based on the superscalar architectures. This superscalar architecture was a single processor. So there is a single ALU containing multiple such execution units. But what happened in array processor, there were separate processing elements in itself. A single chip contained multiple execution units. We can visualize it as a multiple ALUs inside a processor, and each ALU contains multiple adders. So each ALU with multiple adders is a superscalar architecture, but multiple ALUs is kind of array processor. So there is a master controller, main memory, and again this is there are multiple execution or processing elements as we call it, and multiple memory units attached to that. Each memory processing element has its own memory unit attached to it, and instruction is fetched from that memory unit, and they can work in parallel. As I said, this array processor, you can visualize it. There is a control unit, a bus interface unit, and there are multiple ALUs or processing elements which works in parallel. And there is a register. Each register associated with one processing unit, and there is a cache memory. So this is nothing but an architecture of an array processor. So we can say that array processor is a single chip with multiple processing elements or ALUs which work parallelly to achieve the same result fast, to get the same result or to execute the instruction parallelly inside the processor. So this was followed up by a vector processor. It would be wrong to say followed up. So parallelly there were various architectures being developed. So vector processor is one such architecture. So what in this architecture is, so there is a vector processor, the scalar processor, and this combination of vector and scalar processor is put together into the host computer. So computer is there which is connected to the storage and main memory. Main memory is having a vector register which is connected to vector processing units. There is a vector pipeline and vector control unit. And same main memory is also connected to a scalar processor which contains the scalar control unit and scalar functional pipelines. Now what happens is the control unit, when it sees it is a vector instruction, it directs it to the vector processor. So it is a co-processor kind of thing. And if it is a scalar instruction, it can be given to the scalar processor. So this is how a vector processor architecture was evolved. So we can see the vector processing like this. So vector processing is nothing but there are multiple execution units as in array processors, but there are various registers as well. So if there is, for example, if we see in today's scenario, we can say integer is of say 32 bits or long is of 64 bits. So there are 64-bit machines are there. So there are 64-bit registers. There's a cache. Again, along with these 64-bit registers, if you have seen in today's computers, we call it something called as SSE instructions or AVX instructions. So these instructions are nothing but a vector instruction. So in today's processor, we have a vector registers, which are very long registers. So in Xeon Phi or in latest Intel architecture, the vector length is of 512 bits. So one register is 512 bit long. So it can hold many integers. For example, if it is a 256 bit long vector register, it can hold 8 integer values simultaneously. Okay, and if it is a 64-bit register, it can hold 2 integers or one long at a time. So these are vector registers. So the concept is, can you load multiple data? So it is again SIMD kind of computers. As we seen in classification, it is a single instruction, multiple data. So can we load multiple integers into this and process them parallelly in a single instruction for a single operation? So this kind of execution or this kind of processing is called as the vector processing. to show, say V0 is one vector register, V1 is another vector register, and we can load this vector register with different data, and we want to add all this data. So we want to add the data from V0 0 and V1 0, V0 to 1, V1 1 to respective locations at a vector V2. So this can be done parallelly. Okay, so this 256 vector bit vector processor or vector, if it has 256 bit vector length, it can process 8 integers simultaneously. Now we know that one add instructions requires 2 clock cycles. Okay, so sequentially if it is 8 integers, it will require 16 clock cycles to do it sequentially. So with the use of vector instructions, this is done just within 2 clock cycles, because all these 8 integers are added within a 2 clock cycle by all the 8 integer units. So this is the vector processing. So any doubt or question regarding array and vector processing?
If you have any doubts, please raise your hand. We will unmute yourself.
Okay, so we will continue. So after this, so this is what our general architecture used to be, or it is still there. So these
There
are
is one hand raised, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just unmuting. Yeah. Rick Das, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, please.
Strong query. Do we have the slides after the presentations are over?
Yeah, sir, we will give. If you have any doubts related to the presentation, no, so please ask.
No, not
Will-
really. The presentation
Yeah,
is going absolutely fine. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, sir. So you can continue.
Yeah, sure. So this is what the vector processing is. Now we saw various techniques and technologies which got involved during the evolution of the entire architecture, and all these techniques and technologies are still incorporated in the modern processors. But what we can see is how this evolution of VLSI design has impacted today's machines. So till this point, if you see till 2014, there were Pentium 1, Pentium 2 kind of processors. These were a single core processors. The clock frequency raised till 3 gigahertz, and suddenly the clock frequency stopped. So we'll take a look at Moore's law. What Moore's law was, an observation-based law, wherein it was stated that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles approximately every 2 years. So this was quite a good observation. We saw this from 1970 till maybe to 2004 or so. Till 2014 actually, this line has got shifted. So till 2014 we can see. So this law has got very good linear curve. And not only 2014, the number of cores, and these were, you see, tapering here, but this number of transistors in an integrated circuit is still going on. Still it is a linear curve. But what problem occurred? Even though Moore's law was holding true till date, as on now, as I speak, also the Moore's law is holding true. But what has happened at this 2014 point is, we have seen the saturation in the frequency of a processor. Okay, so this saturation basically is attributed to the heat produced by the processor. As you know, if the clock frequency is high, more the clock frequency, more the heat is produced. And now when the heat is produced, what happens in an electronic circuit is, you can say in physics itself, more energy is unstable. If you give an heat or an energy to an electron, it jumps. So as the chips or the transistor is compressing, the technology is improving, and we can fit more and more transistor into a same silicon area. That clearly means that the silicon taken by a transistor has reduced, and the junction or the diode or the transistor area from where the electron flow is there, it is getting shrinked in size. And if heat is increased, the electron starts jumping over the transistors. So that forced the companies to saturate the frequency or even to reduce the frequency, so that the processors or processing chip should not malfunction. So we have seen the rise in transistor count, but the saturation in frequency. So this the industry could not overcome this in the current form, that they could not increase the clock speed anymore. But even though Moore's law was holding true, they could compress the size of transistors so that more transistors can fit into same silicon die. But when the frequency cannot be used, what can be done with these transistors? Right? So you cannot improve the speed of a computer by just by increasing the clock speed of a processor. So the processor speed which increased due to increase in clock speed is saturated at this point, and that's where the technology took a turn, and the new technology of multi-core era came into existence. So now there are more transistors, but clock speed is saturated. So what can be done is you can have multiple units in the same silicon area. So initially the processor had only an ALU, register, cache, control and base unit. Now what the processing companies tried to do is they had a more silicon area, they had more transistor in the same silicon area, but clock speed got saturated. So to do that, they made use of that silicon area to incorporate multiple cores or multiple processor inside a processor, you can say, in a socket. So this core is not a full processor, but it is all the compute, arithmetic and registers taken together, excluding some part of control unit. So a processor is now a part of control unit, bus interface unit, and part of control unit goes inside the each core. So there are multiple cores and they have a shared cache together. So this is one stage which came after the era of Core 2 Duo or Pentium or current chips, which are all multi-core chips. The reason behind them is the saturation of clock frequency. And why saturation? Because the transistors are size of a transistor is reducing, and electron cannot tolerate that much heat. Otherwise, it malfunctions and jumps over from the circuit. To counter this, they came with saturation of clock speed but multiple cores. And the same evolution took place in supercomputing as well. Now what was happening is now there are multiple cores within a processor, but people tried to add multiple processor within a socket as well. Even though this technology was existent before, but now it was a multi-core, multi-socket kind of socket. So all the server end processors or servers, they have multiple processors or multiple chips inside it, and each chip is having multiple cores. And now these chips are connected together via high speed network, which is on motherboard. And this high speed onboard network is called as interconnect hyper transport layer, or QPI in case of Intel and hyper transport in case of AMD. Okay, so this is nothing but a processor can be connected to another processor with a dedicated link. Now this link is not a link between the motherboard and a processor for processor to communicate with IO and other. It is a processor to processor communication channel, so that these four cores can communicate with each other very fast. So this is a QPI kind of quick path interconnect. So the era of multi-core and multi-socket started with this. Now after this, the evolution of clusters tightly so this not after this, but during the same time the evolution of clusters were taking place. So it came up with the SGI, Silicon Graphics Incorporation, wherein the tightly coupled cluster such as SGI Altix came into existence. So cluster is nothing but a set of servers. Now you can see there are multiple servers which are in a single rack, and they're so tightly coupled that they act as a single computer. Even if you log in, you cannot feel that these are two different servers. You cannot log in into it as a different servers. If you log in into one, it is as good as login into all the servers. And these are connected with a high bandwidth network called as CC NUMA network. This is cache coherent NUMA, non-uniform memory access networks, from each one node to another. Now, even though physically they are different servers, they are software wise a single machine, and this is also called as a SSI, single system image kind of computers. So if a computer is installed, if you log in, if each node is having say 8 cores or 2 sockets of 4 core each, so 2 processor 4 core each, so each server will have 8 cores. But if you log on to the machine, it will show 8 into this many servers, this many number of cores available for the user. So it is as good as all these cores or all these processors are into a single server. So this is a tightly coupled cluster or a symmetric multiprocessor as well. So the characteristics being a low latency communication network between these nodes, so that they can have an image of being a single machine. The counterpart of them was a cluster. So it is an HPC cluster, also called as loosely coupled cluster. So they are similar to this, but this CC-NUMA kind of network is not there. Neither single system image is there. So this cluster of multiple rack cluster, wherein each node, each server is an independent server with its own operating system into it. Then what is the use? The use is the cluster stack software. So there is a software which runs above the operating system, which helps in integration of entire server together to perform a single job. This is called as a cluster software. So loosely coupled software, as opposed to the SSI image, the HPC cluster or loosely coupled cluster as having different operating system images running, or maybe same operating system but different images running on each node. Independent OS running on each node. And this OS and this processor communicate or cooperate together to perform a single job. But now if we want to perform a single job, again these nodes are connected together by an network. Okay, so the network latency and bandwidth plays a major role in these kind of clusters. If you see the first tightly coupled cluster, it is generally a symmetric multiprocessor with an interconnect, which we saw at the back end. So there is a shared memory which is shared across all the nodes, all the CPUs, and the same IO which is shared across all the CPUs. So this, and as the memory is at the same hop level from all the CPUs, this CPU is there, it has one hop to the memory. This CPU also has a one hop to memory. So because the single hop, this is a uniform memory access. By uniform memory access, we mean to access this memory, every CPU will have the same latency. So this is a symmetric multiprocessor system with uniform memory access. Again, this is a figure for a symmetric multiprocessor for non-uniform memory access. So now in this case, the memory lies with the CPU and not across the interconnect. Now this is a shared memory, but each memory module is associated with one CPU or one processor. Now this CPU will have a one hop to access this memory. Correspondingly, each CPU will have their one hop to access their corresponding memory. But if this CPU wants to access this memory, it will have to go one hop, two hop to this interconnect to three hop. So this access to this memory is faster than accessing this memory for this particular CPU. So the memory access is not uniform. Different modules, to access the memory of a different modules, it will have to jump over the network and it will have a different kind of latency. This is a non-uniform memory access, and by the mean of SMP symmetric multiprocessor, we mean all CPUs are of same type. All CPUs are same, but memory access pattern is different. So this is a SMP with non-uniform memory access. Now the difference between uniform and non-uniform memory access lies in performance. If you see in this first figure, this shared memory lies across the interconnect. So it was very good. By uniform memory access, we can see that every CPU can access this memory uniformly. So this seems to be a good architecture in first sight, but that is not true. The truth is, for every CPU there is a latency or a hop attached at the interconnect level. Now if all the CPUs try to access this memory, there can be a contention at the interconnect level. See, everyone wants to access the memory, right? So this memory becomes slow, access to the memory becomes slow. But in this case, because this memory is directly accessible to the CPU, accessing this part of memory is faster for the CPU than accessing a memory across the network. So the memory came closer to the CPU, and hence the NUMA architecture is faster in terms of memory access patterns. But the now issue in NUMA architecture is, if this CPU modifies this, there is a hop and there is an inconsistency as well. In most of the architectures, in this kind of non-uniform memory access architecture, the data in all the memories should be similar. Now, if you want to reduce the hops, what is done is the same image, same data is loaded in all the memories, and all the CPUs access their local memory. But one CPU changes data here, the change in this data should be reflected in all the memories. So this memory write back pattern becomes a tedious job, and wherein the cache coherency comes into existence. So what the cache coherency issue is there, if one CPU modifies this memory, and because all the memories are the images of this memory, the respective change should be reflected in all these memories as well. So the write back operation which is done at the back end should be efficient enough so that the latency is hidden, and it feels as if the change here is instantly reflected in all these memory modules. And that's where the supercomputing called as tightly coupled supercomputers, this interconnect plays a major role in cache coherence. It is CC-NUMA, cache coherent NUMA interface, which helps in maintaining the cache coherency or memory coherency across all the memory modules which are near to the CPUs. So that's what we saw about symmetric multiprocessor. So it was followed by, or it was parallelly different architecture which was coming up is a multi-core cluster architecture. Now in multi-core there are, or we can call it a loosely coupled cluster, which we saw. Here there are servers, multiple servers connected together by a high bandwidth interconnect network. So generally for an SMPC cluster or HPC cluster, an InfiniBand is an interconnection which is used. InfiniBand is a high speed and high bandwidth, low latency and high bandwidth network. So current InfiniBand standards actually allow the transfer up to 200 Gbps across the nodes. So this current InfiniBand standard allows that 200 Gbps communication bandwidth, cross-section bandwidth. And latency is in microseconds, 2-3 microseconds. So this is, and what do we mean by latency? Latency is the amount required or the time required to start an operation before, after the instruction of that operation has been given. See, if I want to transfer the data, I said transfer the data. From that point onwards to actual start of transmission, what is the delay? So that delay is a latency. So these InfiniBand networks are very low in latency. If we say we want to communicate, it starts the communication. Okay. And these clusters, there are multiple nodes. Each nodes are having multiple sockets. That means multiple chips are there, and each chip is having the multiple cores. Now you can assume this single node as an SMP, and these SMP nodes are connected to each other by an backend InfiniBand network. So this is a loosely coupled supercomputing cluster or an HPC cluster architecture look like. Again, as we saw, that GPU was one of the main technologies, or we can call it as a disruptive technology in this field of computation. GPUs were the graphics processing units. It was basically, as we know, was a graphics cards long back. So these graphics cards were very fast, or they had a lot of compute cores inside them, and they do the graphics processing very fast as against to general purpose processors. The reason behind it was all the compute or all the silicon or the transistor area which is available was used to build the computational logic and not the control logic. So you cannot call it as an error correction or a fault safe or kind of course. If there is a fault, there is a fault. It should not matter. In image processing or video processing, a minor fault is acceptable. It is preceded by the over. So these were not foolproof kind of processor, but they had a fast processing because all the silicon were used to make multiple cores. So one graphics card had more than 200 cores in it at that time, and now it is more than thousands of cores in a single card. Okay, but the technology disruption come in the form of use of this graphics card for general purpose computation. Now, because graphics card was there and multi-core era came into existence, and graphics card was already there with the multiple cores inside it. So it was a thought process that why can't this graphics card be used for the general purpose computation? So the changes in graphics card or GPU started taking place, and the GPU, graphical processing unit, came into existence. So graphical processing unit is a modification to the graphics cards for general purpose computation. So NVIDIA came up with the NVIDIA Tesla card, which can be used as accelerator inside the computer. So these are the PCI Express cards which can fit into the machine, wherein the main processor can process the entire processing, and if there is something just like graphics processing, video processing, if there is some computation which requires huge processing and it is independent of each other, it can be pushed onto this graphics card and that can be processed fastly. But one drawback of this graphics card was the precision issue. Because video and image processing does not require huge precision as compared to scientific applications, these cards were basically single precision cards, and all the scientific computers were double precisions. So precision plays an important role in scientific computing, whereas for general purpose computing it was the single precision enough. But with this graphics card, another disruption came. The field of artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is basically nothing but an play with a floating or single precision operations. Even the artificial intelligence might not require a single precision as well. It's a half precision or 1/4 precision is also sufficient in many cases. So graphics card was like a boon for artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the boom of artificial MI in this generation came due to advent of these graphics cards or GPUs, graphical processing units. Now how does graphics card work? So there are CPU and GPUs. Now CPUs have multiple cores, as we saw, 8 core processor or quad core processor or 16 core processor. This is a general purpose CPU which is meant for all general purpose computation. Whereas GPU had hundreds of cores within it, but they are not meant for a general purpose computation. They are meant for a specific computation, for addition or some some operation. So some set of operations are well performed on GPU, that too in single precision. So if a general purpose, what happens is this is an application code. All the sequential part, or which is not a compute intense part, which contains IO or memory access or disk access or communication, is taken care by CPU part. But the part where there is a computation involved, there is an addition or huge computation is involved, which does not require memory access, frequent memory. If data is loaded, then only computation is to be done. If that kind of chunk is there, it has to be transferred onto the graphical processing unit, where it does perform only computational part. Okay, so in general application, there is a 5% of code is having huge computation. If you can aggregate this code into a single unit or chunk, then this entire chunk can be processed onto GPU, wherein it executes very fastly, and the remaining part actually executes on a CPU. So GPU acts as an co-processor to a CPU in a machine. So it is also called as an accelerator. Along with these accelerators, along with this GPU, another kind of accelerators which are coming up, they are already in the market and also having a good future, is called as FPGAs. These are the field programmable gate arrays. Now GPUs, as we saw, it is one level lower to CPU in general purpose things, but very good in specific purpose of computation. So these are very large number of cores dedicated for computation. But again, they are cores which are embedded and can do computation. But what FPGA is there, it is a blank chip. You can program them as you want. So FPGA is nothing but a field programmable gate array. It can be programmed and reprogrammed. It is kind of flash. You can flash if it is a EPROM, erasable PROM. So there are compute blocks or logical blocks which are connected by a programming interconnect. Now you can make your logic circuit using this logical block. You have to just say which logical block you have to connect to which logical block to make an AND gate or an OR gate. Right from the gate level, you can make a circuit, entire circuit onto this FPGAs. So this is, you can call it has gone to a more lower level than to a higher level. But the thing is, you can get more performance out of it because CPUs are general purpose. It was not having much performance. GPU is having very good performance over CPUs because it is specific purpose. Now FPGAs, if you know how to program them, it can be faster than GPUs, but it can be for a dedicated application. So these are generally used basically in CDAC. Also FPGAs are used for making RCS, that is reconfigurable computing systems. So an entire algorithm or a code is hardwired inside a FPGA, so that that code works directly runs on an FPGA and performs best. Even if you go on GPU, it will perform better in FPGA over GPU if it is hardwired well. If the logic inside the hardware logic is built inside the FPGA is better. So there are a lot of FPGAs. Altair or Vertex are the few machines, few companies which are providing FPGAs. And nowadays there are experiments which are going on in which as you see, there is an era of multi-core technology. There are ways the industry is trying to incorporate these accelerators and make use of them. One such idea which was proposed at various technology partners meet and various levels are, can we integrate this FPGA inside a CPU core as a part of, for example, a silicon chip or silicon die will have multiple cores and few cores would be dedicated for FPGA so that it can be near to the inside core. So these are experimental things which are being talked about, but this is one of the promising technologies in today's world, which currently acts as an accelerators. Again, FPGAs are also used in various purposes for making SoCs kind of thing. Okay, with this GPUs and accelerators coming into pictures, these clusters became an hybrid clusters. Now you can see there are many supercomputing clusters. For example, top second and third supercomputing cluster is an NVIDIA cluster, wherein these nodes are having GPUs or FPGAs embedded inside them for supercomputing. And that's the era where artificial intelligence has taken over. Now the entire supercomputers are dedicated for AI because these FPGAs and GPUs do perform very well on a single precision level. They are having very high efficiency and high performance. So the algorithms or the computations which took years a decade ago now completes within an hour. So that's how this architecture has evolved basically. So till this point what we have seen is the evolution of entire computer architecture, right from vacuum tubes to transistors to integrated circuits to VLSI circuits to ultra scale integration to the invent of GPUs and FPGAs, and inside it various technologies which got incorporated to improve the performance like pipelining and superscalar architecture.